This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Hello, everyone. It is just after 9 o'clock Tuesday evening here in Hanoi, Vietnam, and President Trump has just landed in this city after a long flight from Washington. He is here, of course, to conduct a high-stakes, high-risk, and highly anticipated second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. The president has a lot riding on this summit after these two leaders first met last June in Singapore. Mr. Trump declared, quote, "There is no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea," an assertion contradicted by U.S. intelligence officials. The world will be watching closely to see what Trump will be able to accomplish during his 2 days on the ground here and what price he is willing to pay to get it. You can see the stairs have been brought up to the front of Air Force One. We expect to see the president momentarily. In the meantime, NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is covering the arrival there just north of us at Hanoi's Noi Bai Airport. Tell us what you're seeing and what the preparations and what the arrival is going to look like, Kelly.
Well, good to be with you, Lester. This will be a summit of seconds. This is the second time a sitting U.S. president will be meeting with the North Korean leader, and the second time President Trump has been in Hanoi. Here at the airport, we expect the U.S. ambassador to Vietnam, Dan Crittenbrink, to meet the president. There will also be some dignitaries from the host country of Vietnam. A color cordon will be here, and the first phase of the president's trip will be acknowledging the host country of Vietnam with meetings with the president and prime minister. Vietnam is really an example for what the Trump administration hopes the relationship with North Korea could someday be, a country with whom we were once at war and now a relationship again that exists. Vietnam communist, but there is prosperity here and a good relationship with the United States. After a half century ago, there was a peak of war and certainly so much hostility between the two nations. So the setting is important in telling the story of this second summit. For President Trump, as you mentioned, a very long journey. So because it is evening here, he will be greeted formally, and then we'll have some downtime before all of the official festivities begin. Lester?
Yeah, the red carpet literally being rolled out as we speak as Vietnamese color guards take their position along the stairs there. I'm joined by our chief White House correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Hallie, in days past, for a meeting like this, they would already have a thumbnail of what they're going to produce at the end. Is there any sense of an agenda here or goals they know they'll be able to accomplish?
So yes, on the agenda, TBD on the goals, Lester. You talk about how typically, yes, you would come in at the high level, the principal level with the president, with the North Korean leader, and it would have already mostly been worked out, what they would talk about, what they might agree on. In this instance, just like what we saw in the Singapore summit that you and I covered last summer, there are still big question marks about that. There is an agenda. The U.S. has a clear agenda. They want to see North Korea denuclearized. They want to see Kim Jong Un take steps to do that. But as you have pointed out, intelligence officials say that is not happening. Even as we speak, the North Koreans are still working to advance their nuclear weapons program. And so there is some skepticism that the president will be able to come out of this second summit achieving what he wants to achieve. Now, what could the U.S. offer? There are some incentives. There are some what you might call carrots that could be on the table as it relates to where the negotiations might go. So, for example, you may see the opening or the announcement of the opening of diplomatic interests, basically these bare bones diplomatic outposts that would mark a new sort of relationship between the U.S. and North Korea. You could see the easing of some more minor economic sanctions. You could see, for example, a peace declaration on the Korean Peninsula. That is something that might end up coming out of this. There could also be a surprise. At the last summit, we saw, of course, the president talk about ending military exercises with South Korea, something that caught even his own Pentagon a little bit off guard. What's interesting is we watch the president get ready to take the steps and come out of Air Force One. You're right. They literally are rolling out a red carpet for him, as they did for Kim Jong Un. Remember, Kim is on an official state visit here in Vietnam. So there is a level of pomp and circumstance related to that the President Trump, just is not going to have, because it's not that level of formality. But this arrival ceremony looks like it's intended to be a way for the Vietnamese to say, hey, you're here, we're welcoming you formally, and with some of that pomp and circumstance that both leaders want to see.
And we should note that Kim came to town in a very different manner.
Oh boy,
that armored train that took him on a journey through China and then here into Hanoi, and crowds cheering as he was welcomed at his hotel. Yeah, quite the journey. And there's the pictures of him earlier coming off that special armored train. Now, Hallie, they're going to have a little more time together based on what I see in the schedule than what we saw in Singapore. The president was in and out of that. This is a 2-day visit.
This is 2 days, and interestingly, we have just learned, Lester, just in the last 12, 18 hours or so, that they will actually have dinner tomorrow night. So the two of them will sit down, very small groups. So it'll be the leaders and then 2 aides on either side. And the White House has informed us it'll be Mick Mulvaney, the president's chief of staff, and Secretary Pompeo, who of course has been working on these negotiations ever since the last summit, essentially. That is going to be fascinating to see how these two do when it is not necessarily in the confines of an official, formal discussion as it relates to negotiations. This is just dinner. We know that President Trump back home often dines with folks regularly, bounces ideas off of them. So I think to be a fly on the wall in that room is fascinating. Secretary Pompeo, it should be noted, has also met with the Vietnamese foreign minister here already. He's been on the ground talking with the lead negotiator on the U.S. side, making those final preparations. But remember, Pompeo has been involved in this really since the last summit. He had conversations in October. The White House says that things sort of went flat a little bit with these North Korean talks in October and November and in part of December. But in late December, the momentum picked up. You saw these letters that were sent and received between, as President Trump has talked about, him and Kim, as the two developed what the president has called a great relationship. As you know, that has raised some serious questions considering the human rights abuses, the grave human rights abuses that Kim perpetrates in North Korea.
And we recall from that last meeting, they came out of it with a letter basically stating that, you know, we like the idea of denuclearization, and beyond that, not a lot. Here is the president now as he stands at the top of the stairs there at Air Force One and greets the official crowd there at the airport. He is traveling without the First Lady on this visit. You noted he'll have dinner. I'm trying to do the time change correctly.
Tomorrow, 24 hours basically from when we are right now, if that helps.
The airplane, the Air Force One, made a couple of fueling stops on the way here. There's any way you slice it, it is a very long and exhausting journey, as we can all attest to. But he'll get a night's sleep here. Again, it's a little after 9 o'clock at night. And the president greeting some folks, probably from the U.S. Embassy.
And the president has done these journeys before. He did that lengthy Asia trip in the first year of his administration, the summit in Singapore, of course, the first time he met with Kim Jong Un. This was 20 hours for the president on Air Force One. He's there with his aides. He's there having conversations, presumably with the people who are traveling with him on the White House side, including some of these negotiators, as he speaks now with the Vietnamese leaders. And again, this is a bit more formal than you might expect to see for an airport arrival on the tarmac here. If they pulled out, you'd see that red carpet and the color guard, as you mentioned, there to greet President Trump. It was a very different scene for Kim Jong Un. He spent 65 hours on that slow-moving train through China before hopping into a car when he reached the Vietnamese border. And it is a spectacle here, Lester. I know you've walked around Hanoi and have had a chance to see it. The South Korean media, the Vietnamese media, the Japanese media, congregating at corners, waiting for any kind of a glimpse they could get of this reclusive leader who, by the way, we believe might still be at the North Korean embassy. He left his hotel after arrival here in Hanoi and went over to the embassy where he's been for several hours.
There's the president greeting folks there at the bottom of the stairs as he arrives here in Hanoi for this all-important summit. And again, the expectation's high. He has tried to tamp down expectations, speaking the other day, essentially saying, well, if they're not testing, that's a win. Well, they haven't been testing their ballistic missiles since, I believe, November of 2017. But as a nuclear weapons expert pointed out to me, once you're finished, you don't have to test. The U.S. doesn't test. Other nuclear-armed countries don't test anymore because they assume they've got working hardware. So what indication that is of the intent is of course a big question that hovers over all of this.
And there is a fear that there will be a de facto recognition of North Korea as a nuclear power, which practically nobody wants to see at this point. The White House will talk frequently about the lack of missile tests. The president and his aides telling us that that is a win for them, that in essence, Lester, it could be worse. That's the argument.
Yeah, the president looks like he's going to go straight into presidential limousine, often known, called the Beast, and ride into town. Again, this is not a state visit, so some pomp and circumstance, but not
and not nearly what you saw for Kim Jong Un and what you will see for the North Korean leader here in Vietnam, because remember, he is staying past the summit as well. We believe he'll stay for several days.
Yeah. I believe we have also standing by our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell in Washington. Andrea, what are your thoughts as you watch these two men come together here? What is the pressure the president is under right now?
Well, this is the scene that the president clearly wants. It is the pomp and circumstance of an arrival at a summit, the second summit. But the pressure really is, according to intelligence officials and all of the experts you and I and Hallie talked to, that they will give away too much, that this president, as we remember in Singapore, declared that the nuclear threat was over, and that was not accurate, that he gave away the joint military exercises with South Korea, which are very important for readiness, to the dismay of his former defense secretary, Jim Mattis. Mattis at the time completely caught unaware by that. And that at this stage, when he says, as you were just pointing out with Hallie, when he says that I'm happy, which he told the governors on Sunday night here at their annual gathering, I'm happy as long as they're not testing. They don't have to test anymore. They have finished the job of testing. And the question is, they have so lowered the threshold of what is an acceptable outcome of this summit that nuclear experts and his own intelligence community are very concerned indeed. What he might do in a one-on-one meeting is, of course, of concern after what happened in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin. So it is somewhat encouraging that Mike Pompeo will certainly be there at the dinner, at the social occasion. And Pompeo has been the point person on all of these talks, but on one trip went all the way to Pyongyang and didn't even get to see Kim Jong Un. So the fact is, there have been lots of hiccups along the way, and there is a great wariness that this president would give away the store.
All right, Andrea, thank you. And before we wrap up here, Hallie, I just want to, we should note, as the president comes here, the world will be watching him and this summit, but he is going to have an ear cocked to what's going on back home when his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, testifies before Congress.
You're actually watching that split screen moment now, Lester, because Michael Cohen, we're told, has just arrived on Capitol Hill for the first of 3 days of testimony in front of lawmakers, both publicly and behind closed doors. Cohen, of course, is the president's former attorney who is now promising, according to a source familiar with what Cohen will say, to reveal what he describes as crimes that Donald Trump has committed. Remember, Michael Cohen has some serious credibility questions. He is headed to prison for essentially lying to the feds about various issues related to his dealings with the campaign, with the president himself. But this is highly anticipated. There's a lot of senators, both Republicans and Democrats, who are eager to hear what Michael Cohen has to say. And even though, given the time zone, that's all going to be happening while the president is presumably sleeping, I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe saw a tweet or two this week.
But you got it right. This is going to be, for the next couple of days, a split screen moment. Hallie, thank you. We will be here to cover this summit over the next 2 days and come back on the air, certainly as events warrant. You can also follow all the latest news and developments by downloading our NBC News app. And of course, I'll be back later with NBC Nightly News tonight from Hanoi. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, Hanoi.